So is it working now? Okay, good.
Test.
Good morning, everyone. So we're going to, for those of us that are watching virtually, we're wrangling a few more people here live in the room with us. So if you can just bear with us for just a moment or two, we're going to get started here really shortly. All right. So good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle McKiddish, and I'm the Executive Vice President of the Greater Pittston Chamber of Commerce. And before we get started this morning, I would like to give a big shout out to the Greater Wyoming Valley Chamber of Commerce for having us here this morning. And we always partner with the PA Career Link, specifically Luzerne County. So we're really grateful to have them in the room with us today. And as part of my co-part here this morning is John T. Cash, who will be presenting from KDP, who is Keystone Development Partnership, and he will introduce himself when he comes up here in just a moment. So we'd like to do a couple of little quick housekeeping things. For those of you who are watching us virtually this morning, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the comments. We will be monitoring those in the comments, so as you have questions as we go throughout the day, or the morning rather, we will be keeping an eye on those questions, so we will take care of that. We've got that presentation broken into 3 sections, essentially. The first one talks about registered apprenticeships in general and how to create them and what that means. The second presentation piece of the presentation talks about the apprenticeship that we have sponsored as a group sponsor, Innovations in Management. So that's a very specific example of what John's going to be talking about in the first part. And the second part, or the third part rather, is going to be talking about funding. So if we can, room here, we would like to hold those questions until we get to the end of the sections, and then we'll go through that. And I believe we should have enough time at the end to have more of an open discussion. So if anybody in the room wants to talk specifically about things that we've done and how we've gotten to where we are today with our apprenticeship program, we're certainly really glad to answer those questions. So a couple of other little housekeeping things. If you're in the building, please feel free to help yourselves to food and drink throughout, and bathroom is down the hall straight ahead, so you can't miss it. We are also here today, again, because of a partnership I mentioned with PA Career Link, but also through funding that was available from a grant. So it's also in partnership with the Lackawanna and Pocono Workforce Development Boards as well. So we appreciate that. One more little piece, we've got Park Media, and they are helping us with our live stream this morning. So for me, this is our first opportunity doing something live stream, but they certainly are the experts, and we appreciate everything they've done for us to get us set up today. And Luzerne County Community College is our partnership. They are our classroom sponsor. They are our what they call an RTI provider. So that is who the classroom training through the Innovations in Management Apprenticeship is going to be through. So we really appreciate their support as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce you here to John T. Cash from Keystone Development Partnership.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you, everybody, for the invitation to come here and speak to you about registered apprenticeship programs. If you don't mind, I'll introduce myself and my organization. I'm John T. Cash. I'm the Executive Director of Keystone Development Partnership, and we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're considered a workforce intermediary, and what I mean by that is we were formed in 2005 by the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, and to manage labor management type of workforce development projects, specifically to workforce development. But we diversified our services since then, and that's how we got into the workforce intermediary piece. And what I mean by that is we have contracts through the U.S. Department of Labor in partnership with Jobs for the Future out of Boston and the Working for America Institute. And we also have contracts with the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry, the Pennsylvania Apprenticeship and Training Office. And what we do with those contracts is we help the federal government and the state government expand registered apprenticeship programs. So we go out with any group, employers, any other group, any other association who wants to develop, register, implement, and administer registered apprenticeship programs. The grants and the contracts we have with the government pay for our services. There's no cost to employers or any other organizations, workforce board, career links, or anything like that. So that's a little bit about my organization, and that's why I'm here today speaking to you about registered apprenticeship programs. there's a few things that I'm going to cover, and I'm going to talk about what a registered apprenticeship program is, and who can hire an apprentice, be an apprentice, and also why would you choose an apprenticeship program as a strategic workforce development plan for your company, and then we'll get into how you can get started in registering your own apprenticeship program. So what is a registered apprenticeship program? It's a job. You know, a lot of people used to apprenticeship programs is earn and learn. It's actually earn, learn, and produce. Apprentices, it's a work-based training program. It's very institutionalized and focused on an occupation. So an apprenticeship program is a job. And I want to go over the 5 components of a registered apprenticeship program, if you don't mind. So I said the first component, it is a job. In order to be an apprentice, you have to work with an employer who's involved in a registered apprenticeship program. Again, earn, learn, and produce while you work. It's work-based learning. So there's 2 components to the instruction for registered apprenticeship programs. One is the on-the-job training or the work-based learning under the guidance of a mentor. And that's a really important, and it's very focused, it's very planned out. It's not, the old apprenticeship programs, we used to call them FJAs, follow Joe around. You know, the employer says, hey, Bob, follow Joe around, see what he does, and then do that too. Well, this isn't that. This is a very institutionalized type of program, and it's very strategic in how it's delivered. But when we talk about mentors, the one point that I do like to make is, you know, there was an old saying, and I say it a lot, you know, when a person dies, they say a library burns to the ground. All that knowledge is gone. Well, that's the same thing with your workforce, too. When your experienced workers leave, whether they're there 20 years, 30 years, they take another job. If they take the knowledge that they gained while they were on the job with them, then you missed a great opportunity to transfer that knowledge. And registered apprenticeship programs really change the culture of your business through mentorship of experienced workers. So that's based learning or on-the-job training portion of a registered apprenticeship program. Then we have the classroom learning. That's what happens in the classroom under the guidance of an instructor. In Michelle's case, her innovations in management, that's a partnership with the Luzerne County Community College. But instructors can be community colleges, universities, technical training providers. Your company can even, if department, you can even do these things in-house. We have a lot of employers who decide to use online training options as well too. So it can be any of those or all of those mixed together, whatever meets your needs. So it's a combination on the job training with classroom instruction, which Michelle referred to in the apprenticeship world as related technical instruction, or RTI. You'll hear both of those terms. I did talk about mentorship. So it's under the guidance of a mentor, and then the credential. When you register an apprenticeship program in Pennsylvania or anywhere in the country, it's a nationally recognized program, and it produces a nationally recognized credential anywhere in the country. You can take that anywhere in the country. It's portable, it's portable. You can take it with you. The one thing that I did fail to mention under a paid job, so an apprentice, it could, well, we'll talk about that. But there is one requirement, in that there's at least one wage gain throughout the duration of your apprenticeship program. So you start at a first level apprentice, and then you have a wage gain, and then you complete your apprenticeship program. There can be several wage gains depending on the length of the program, but there has to be a wage gain included. So who can hire an apprentice? We work with small companies. We work with large companies, union shops, non-union shops. We work with them all. Non-for-profit organizations, like we're working with UPMC. They're doing an environmental specialist, and we're working with a nursing home for individuals with intellectual disabilities, and we're actually creating a career ladder there. They have direct support professionals who are going to go into CAs, who are going to go into LPNs, who are going to go into RNs. So it could be nonprofit organizations as well too. With that, next slide, please. Sorry. So who can be an apprentice? So there aren't a whole lot of requirements to become an apprentice, but you do need to be 18 years old. You do need to have a high school diploma, and you can be a new employee or you can be an incumbent worker. In the case where I talked about the healthcare occupation, they're looking to take their DSPs, their direct support professionals, and have them climb the ladder. So that's a strategy that employers certainly embrace. And the idea is when we do work with employers, a lot of times we take their most critical occupation, we address that through registered apprenticeship program, and then we build the ladder up to it. So we try to fix an issue and then create a strategy so that doesn't occur again. Next, we want to talk about why would you choose an apprenticeship program. And I apologize, I do have to look back at this slide. But improve recruitment. I do a lot of work with workforce boards, Pennsylvania Career Link offices, and we do know that when job seekers are looking for a job and there's an apprenticeship involved in the program, a lot of times they'll look more favorably at the employer with the apprenticeship program rather than where there isn't any opportunity to advance without the apprenticeship program. We do know that the turnover rate is lower. There's been a lot of studies done nationally on turnover rate. And I know when we talk about turnover rate, a lot of times we'll see that it's 90%, 90% retention. And they're talking like 6 months after an apprenticeship program is completed. I don't know that they worked that out any further than that, but at least 6 months after, the retention rate bumps up to about 90%. Increased productivity. A lot of industries, almost every industry, they're about as lean as they can get. And really the only way that they can advance is through increased productivity. So through a skilled up employee, that's really the way that you can increase your business potential through more skilled workforce and increase your productivity. And then we talk about retaining the company's knowledge and expertise, and that was the example I gave about the transfer of knowledge from the experienced worker, less experienced worker through the registered apprenticeship program. So the benefits for job seekers is you're in a training program, you're learning, you're increasing your skills, but you're getting paid while you do it. Again, increased skills. There's a wage progression. I told you there's a required wage progression. Nobody tells you what that wage is. It's not the state. It's not the federal government. You set the wage scale. It's up to you. But there has to be a wage progression. And then again, for the individual, for the apprentice, it's a industry recognized credential. And one thing that I was pausing earlier for, I was trying to think what I wanted to say, is a lot of folks think, registered apprenticeship program, building and construction, we're talking about carpenters, plumbers, electricians. No, there's 1,500 occupations that are apprenticeable. We work with healthcare, we work with IT, we work with finance. Michelle's in business management, on and on. Early childhood education. So there's a lot of occupations that are apprenticeable, and there is a litmus test. If it requires at least 144 hours in the classroom and 2,000 hours on the job training, it is an apprenticeable occupation. Michelle? So how do you get started? Well, you would call like me or the Pennsylvania Apprenticeship and Training Office, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So what would somebody like me come out, or the Pennsylvania Apprenticeship and Training, they have a training office, they have apprenticeship training representatives, or ATRs. You would make a call to the state, you'd say, hey, I'm interested in the program, how can I get started, how can you help me? So we come out, we meet with you, and we say, okay, it's not a company, once you register an apprenticeship program, it's all occupations, it's an individual occupation. You can register occupations, but it's occupation driven. So we identify the occupation, we start to develop the training plan, and then we suggest you maybe bring a training provider if you're, that you prefer, maybe you worked with, had a relationship, or we can, let you know who's in your area. But we start to work together as a team. It's like a community of practice. We try to bring everybody in the room who can help at the same time, whether it's the career link for and things like that. Then we prepare the registration. So there's a lot of documentation. It's not overwhelming. When you first look at the stack, it looks like a phone book, and it takes you, to get through a lot of paperwork, it's an hour just to get through it, and we help you, we hold your hand. So that's not really a problem there. So we complete the paperwork, and we submit it to the State Apprenticeship and Training Office. There's a committee of 11 individuals. It's the Pennsylvania Apprenticeship Training Council. And what they do is they review every application to submit an apprenticeship program. They ask the sponsors, the people who are registering the program, to defend their application, more or less explain what they're trying to do with it, and then they approve it as well too. So it's a council of 11 professionals in Pennsylvania who do this for the state. And then you launch your apprenticeship program. You recruit your apprentices, and you start to work with the federal database called RAPIDS, R-A-P-I-D-S, or Registered Apprenticeship Partners Information Data System. And you start to, we train you on that. We how to use that, and it's not really cumbersome. It's easier than working with an Excel spreadsheet, definitely. And then the other thing we do is then we start to introduce you to funding sources that help you support the cost of the apprenticeship program. And there is a great initiative by the federal and state governments to support registered apprenticeship programs. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. So the one thing that I really want to point out is I talked a lot about apprenticeship programs. We're Keystone Development Partnership. We have contracts with the Pennsylvania Apprenticeship and Training Office. They drive the agenda, they set the policy, and we support them. I just didn't want there to be any confusion on that. We're not the Pennsylvania Apprenticeship and Training Office, but we do support them in all their initiatives. So there's a new director. She's new from, I think, December, and her name is Tara Lowe. She's awesome to work with. She's a ball of energy. She's hard to keep up with, and she's really looking forward to meeting any individuals or any companies that are interested in learning about registered apprenticeship programs. And I strongly suggest that you reach out to her for help. So just to recap, we have classroom instruction, on-the-job training, wage progression, and in the end you have a skilled worker. Are there any questions? Yes. To register a program or to run a program? No, there's not a, no, it's not semesters, trimesters, no. When you register an apprenticeship program, you kind of drive the program. So you would work with training provider partners, and you'd have to, you know, settle on a schedule together. But you can start apprentices one day, one after another, every day. But no, there's no schedule, no semesters, nothing. And then actually right now, the Pennsylvania Apprenticeship Training Council, there's so many programs that they're working on to register. They met once a month, now they're meeting twice monthly to be able to advance you know, programs and register them. But thank you for your question.
I do have an online question. Someone wants to know can someone with a green card be in this program?
You know, that's a great question too, because you know what, I'm going to have to defer that answer and get back to you too, because I do know that it's more tied to the employer than it is the employee. But I don't, for instance, you know, because some of the Northeast Pennsylvania counties border other states, you can have a person who lives in another state be an apprentice in Pennsylvania, but I'm not sure about the green card. But really what it says is, I do believe the federal language says you have to be able to legally work within Pennsylvania. So I'm thinking yes, but I'd have to get back to you on that. That's it. Michelle?
I'm going to actually ask John to hang with me here before we move into the second section, because the early part of this section, when we talk about innovations in management is an already registered group-sponsored apprenticeship program. And I'm asking John to hang with me here for a little bit, because one of the things that we're going to talk about, so we're going to cover three things here. We're going to talk about what is a group-sponsored registered apprenticeship. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what specifically the innovations in management apprenticeship is. Then we're going to talk a little bit about why you should choose that type of program, and then we'll get into funding in the next section. So to begin with, we are a group-sponsored apprenticeship. So John, maybe you can spend a little time talking about the different kinds of apprenticeships and the way that different work together, because you can be an individual employer and have your own apprenticeship, or you can do what we're doing, which is a group-sponsored apprenticeship, which means that there's multiple employers that can be involved. And then the work system is always a piece of that, and there's always a training capacity.
I'll give it a shot. It's hard for me. I take a long story or short story and make it long. So there's a couple different ways to register, a few different ways to register apprenticeship programs. One is called individual, joint, individual, non-joint. So it's one single employer registering a program. Joint means there's a union involved. Non-joint means there's not a union involved. And then there's what's called a group sponsorship program. Then there's what's called a group sponsorship program. I'm sorry, didn't have the microphone on.
That's okay.
And so what we did was, an example, so we've had a contract with the state since 2016 to help expand registered apprenticeship programs. And we were meeting with employers one after another and said, look, we really want to get involved in a registered apprenticeship program, but we don't have the capacity, or we don't think we have the capacity to run the program on our own. So what we did was we went out and worked with groups like Michelle's to say, hey, look, would you be interested in or would you be willing to register an apprenticeship program in your name and do all the cover all the administrative duties? So again, we had small and large employers who said, we don't think we can do this. So we convinced community colleges, industry associations, chambers of commerce to register the program. So what that means is Michelle, for instance, met with employers in the region, said, hey, what are some occupations that you're interested in, and how can we meet your need? And she registered the Innovations in Management apprenticeship program. Michelle, all the paperwork that's required, the coordination between the on-the-job training, the related technical instruction, working with the training provider and things like that, Michelle's organization does that for you. And the other thing that really accomplishes is an economy of skill, because sometimes, we've worked with training providers and they said, look, really, if you have 1 or 2 people in the program, we have to charge you maybe to cover 5 or 6 so we can break even on the cost of delivering that. Through this economy of skill that Michelle is offering, 5 employers can be involved. They can all send 1 employee and really only pay for the seat that they're occupying. So it's for the convenience of the capacity to run the program, but it's also a cost-saving feature as well, too. Does that make sense?
Thanks, John. So when we talk about the innovations in management, so it is a group-sponsored registered apprenticeship. So what does that mean? That means essentially what John says. We are the group sponsor as the Greater Pittston Chamber of Commerce, and that means that we can then involve multiple employers. We work with multiple workforce boards, and we have our RTI, our training partner. So potentially in the future, we could even have more than 1 training partner. So the idea behind this is that someone, the group sponsor, does most of the heavy lifting to get the program into fruition, and then as many people as want to participate in that can do so on. It's a relatively simple process for the employer. When we talk about who does this, I know John mentioned earlier the ATO office. It's part of the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry, their apprenticeship and training office. We did get a certificate, looking right at it there, through the ATO Council for the program. So that's where we come into the registered piece of it. So it's registered and it's group sponsored. So again, why choose a group-sponsored apprenticeship? Because we've already done. The group sponsor is the one who's done the heavy lifting. We've put the program together. We've talked to different employers. We've gone through all of those that process that is the most time-consuming part of pulling it together. The other part of this is as a group sponsor and understanding what our employers need, specifically to the Innovations in Management apprenticeship, we have arranged it so it could be a rolling entry. And you'll see as we start talking about the classroom training and the on-the-job learning, there's so many different categories that don't necessarily one need to come before the other. So anytime you've got someone you're ready to put into the apprentice program, you could put them in on a rolling basis. So every time you need someone, you get them into the program and they just take the next group of classes that are online until they complete them all in the end. And we'll talk more about that one. It'll be easier to see when you see the actual training programs. So on the job learning process, even though we're working with many different employers, it was very interesting. When we first started working through this process, I used ONET a lot to kind of research skills that would be needed in a management type of position. And I use the word management very loosely. If you think about management, that's a skill. It's a process. It's something that needs to be done. So when you're looking within your own companies, that management process may be completed by a team leader. It might be a supervisor. You might have a special name for someone who runs a group, So we're not talking specifically about only managers in your company. We're talking about anyone within your organization who has the responsibility of either wrangling a team or wrangling process. So going back to that piece, then something like the Innovations in Management, it covers across many industries. We can cover many different occupations within that management concept. And then the other piece of that is that the financial investment is minimized. And again, that's because the group sponsor is the one that made the initial investment to put the pieces together and then is also on top of managing all of the processes and the paperwork and everything and the tracking that needs to be done for the apprentice and the employer within the program. So I like to talk a little bit about how we got here today. And the reason I like to talk about this is because 5 years ago, I came to the Greater Pittston Chamber of Commerce and knew very, very little about workforce development, but developed some great relationships with the women in our local career link. And about 2 years in, one of them literally, I kid you not, took their foot and pushed me off the ledge because they were determined that one of us was going to do an apprenticeship program. So this is what we did. And honestly, it took us probably 2 years to get the program off the ground, and we're very excited that we made that commitment. And what we did is we did exactly what John said. We talked to our members. We had conversations about needing certified nurse assistants. We had conversations about needing diesel mechanics. We had conversations about so many things. But what happened is, as we were having these conversations, the one thing that was in common with every employer that we talked to is every one of them needed help taking their best employees and moving them forward within the organization. So when we started realizing that that was a need that extended beyond all of these different occupations, we knew that that was the direction that we pretty much the day that Innovations in Management was born. So we really worked very hard creating a program that teaches skill. This is not a leadership program. This is a program that gives people the skills that they need in order to manage, again, groups, departments, programs. Management pieces, all those pieces of the puzzle, knowing what you need and requires skills, and that's what this program will teach you. When John was talking about the 5 pieces of apprenticeship, that first piece is a paid job. So I put 2 slides in here, and we'll spend a little bit of time on this one because the numbers are a little bit old. When we initially registered this program, we had to put a minimum in. And what that minimum means is it was a minimum that employers were required to pay people in order to even enter into the program. So we felt that if we were really pushing people and we were pushing employers to really push people up into through their organization, they had to come out at the end of the day by making at least $15 an hour. So in this particular example, this was a big jump, but a few years ago, this was not unreasonable to take someone who's working full-time from $10 an hour up to $15. This is something that looks a little bit more realistic today. So let's say you've got someone on staff that's making $16 an hour, because John was also talking about the wage progression. That's a big piece of the apprenticeship. Every time they learn a new skill, a little bit of a wage progression. Go through another process, complete another piece of the puzzle, another wage progression. So this example, I think, applies a little bit better today. You've got someone in your staff or in your organization that's making $16, and you want to move them up to $19 through this program. So a couple of things that it's important to understand, and one of them is you'll see here at the very bottom, we're talking about entry wage. When we talk about entry wage in an apprenticeship, what that means is that's the price. That's what you would pay to someone off the street who's already trained to do the job. So what an apprenticeship does is it takes someone in your organization who doesn't necessarily have the skills to do that job. In our particular case, it's a 15 to 18-month process, still 2,000 hours on the on-the-job learning, 192 in the classroom. And what you do now is you start them with wherever they are, and you move them up slowly through the progression as they complete the different steps of the program up to that entry wage. So there's another advantage as an employer. Now what you're doing is you've essentially saved some money there because you're not paying full price for someone who's not quite there yet. But now you're training them within your organization. You're teaching them in your culture. You're teaching them your ways. You're teaching them your process. So at the end of that, not only, because honestly, you bring in a new hire, you're going to have to go through a lot of that training anyway. But now as part of the program, you're moving them slowly into that entry wage. So just as an example, you can kind of see here as they go through the different, since there's 2,000 hours to complete the program, they start after 550 hours, they move up from 16 to 663. After another 550, they move to that 1722 rather. And when they complete the program, so that's after their entire 2,000 hours in, finish their, and they've done all of the pieces of the program, then they complete it, get their certificate, and then that's when they start earning their entry wage. So that's part of the paid, it's a job program. So when we talk about work programs, we're talking a lot about on-the-job learning, how they're doing this. What we've done is we've created a process, and you'll see when I move to the talking about the classroom training, that very much mirrors the classroom training. What kind of things are important in management? One of the things you need to do is supervisory principles. You need to know how to manage people. The other thing that you need to be good at is office management. Now we're talking about more of the physical plant space. We're talking about processes. We're talking about timing. We're talking about equipment. Do you have the tools you need to do the job? There's a human resource component to this as well. How do you talk to your team? How do you motivate your team? How do you communicate? And I think that's the next piece too, that business communication, and then of course the introduction to customer service. All of these pieces are parts of things that you know that your good manager needs to do. So you walk them through the organization, how you want to learn the different components of each of them, which of course mirror very closely the classroom training. So classroom training through LCC, what we do is we start off on one, and this is a self-taught class. It's a big overall introductory to all the topics that we're going to cover throughout the program. And then they move on to one class at a time, first-line supervisory principles. So let's go back to remembering what we talked about. Apprenticeship is what? Apprenticeship is a job. So it's a job. Now that you've put someone in this job, they've got to be doing all of these components all at one time. working, but when they're learning on it, you're focusing about one component at a time. So if they're physically in the classroom taking the first line supervisory principles, then that's really what you're focused on your on-the-job learning. Your mentors, your trainers, that's the pieces that they're focused on. Now, of course, they're still performing the full capacity of the job and would potentially be learning other pieces of it, but we're working it through one piece at a time. We have these listed in no particular order, and that's when I was talking earlier about the fact that there's no set time frame when you can start someone. So if we happen to be in the middle of the first line supervisory principles and you want to start an apprentice, then they just start on the next office management class, and they just follow those classes all the way through until they're done. And we're very grateful for LCC, because if 2020 is anything, it's taught us that we're very good at doing things not at our job anymore. So as a result, I think that that's helped this program more than anything else, because where we had truly intended to do some true in-person classroom training, we've now been able to take a lot of these classes and do them virtually. So we've got options for both synchronous, meaning a line, but it's happening all at one time, or asynchronous, which is essentially a self-taught process. So when an apprentice starts, they need to complete all of these by the end of the program, but it doesn't really matter what order they're taking them in. So that, I think, helps in a lot of cases for many employers, because it gives you the flexibility to bring someone in when you're ready or when the time is right, or the time is right for them. So we did try to build some flexibility in there. We tried to cover all of the bases that we needed as far as doing that. Now you'll see on the bottom here, I've got safety incorporated, and it should have been on the last slide too, all of those pieces, because this is a very, very big, obviously, something that's very important to the Department of Labor industry, is safety. So there is a component of the safety needs in every aspect of this training program. So whether we're talking about safety and people and helping them understand how to make good choices and make sure they're getting the training they need, or whether we're talking about it from the perspective of making sure that the space that they're working in is safe, there's a lot of different ways that a manager needs to think about safety within their organization, or their supervisor or the team leader. So we make sure we talk about that in each of the different categories as well. So I realize it's a lot of information, so I want to talk a little bit more even about the mentoring piece. So this is interesting too, because we talk about the difference between trainers, mentors. You hear the word journey worker. When you hear all of these words, these are all other employees within your organization. So in some cases, you've got a small organization, and a mentor may only be working one-on-one with one other person. But we have many employers who are interested in this program or have started implementing it, who are working with a group of people. So you may have someone in your organization, and if you look back very quickly here at the topics that we're talking about, you may have someone who's stick at first line supervisory skills or the people management. So you want your apprentice to train with them. But then you might have somebody else that's better at the office management piece, or at the human resource piece, or at the communications piece, or the customer service piece. So it's okay to have, you could have multiple trainers. What's very nice is if you attach one single mentor to the apprentice. So now that mentor, it helps them in a couple of different ways. That mentor should not be their direct supervisor. That mentor should be their resource, so that the apprentice always has someone to go to if they have a concern about something, or they're not quite understanding, or they need additional support. So in bigger organizations, that's a little bit easier. In some of your smaller organizations, I think it becomes a little bit of a challenge, because in that case, you truly have one or two people that are managing all of those pieces of the puzzle. Yet, at the same time, every time you bring someone new into an organization, those are all pieces of the puzzle that you're going through. So if you choose a program such as the Innovations in Management one, someone's going to literally hand you the guidelines and the list and everything that you need to go through. And so now it's just a matter of going through and checking them off as we go. And even if we say something along the lines of, maintain safety on the production floors are going to look different no matter how that is, and you know how you're going to manage it within your facility. So the details of that are up to the employer, but the guidelines and the outlines are already developed as part of the program for the employer. They don't need to create them. So moving into the last piece, the nationally recognized apprenticeship certificate. So Dawn was talking about a credential that's portable. Every apprentice that does any registered apprenticeship gets their apprenticeship certificate. But in addition to that, with the Innovations in Management, there are 16 credits, 16 college credits that you have at the end of the program. And in addition to that, it is a small business skills diploma program. So the apprentice now walks away with more than one credential. They're walking away essentially with two. So Benefits to employers. We already talked about the rolling enrollment. We talked about the fact that this group sponsor does the heavy lifting. But the nice part about this is, and I like to tell this when I think about it because everyone can picture somebody in their mind when we talk about it. Everybody knows that one employee that's in that organization. They're there all the time. They're willing to go that extra mile. They've got that perfect feel for the culture. They belong there. And for reasons, many, many reasons, they don't have the skills to move forward within the organization. This investment in this program for that employee now has essentially pretty much guaranteed the employer that that employee is going to stay with you forever. And it's now going to have the skills that you're going to be able to rely on them to move them through the organization. And when you're talking about management skills like this, they're transferable between different industries, different departments, in different areas. So it gives the employer and, of course, the apprentice a lot more flexibility. So it's a really great way to upskill many of your current employees, or even sometimes in an interview that there's somebody that you really want to have, but they don't quite meet those needs. Another opportunity to give them the skills they need to bring them into the organization at the level that you need them. And certainly for the employees, it's fantastic because, again, right out of the gate, it's a job. Not only is it a job, but it's a job that's going to give them those progressive wins every few hours, every once in a while. Within the first year of the program, they get those little progressive wins, which is great for them. They're making their money. They're learning the skills that they need to have. They're taking something with them for the future, and they're really building a program, and they're building a future for themselves as well. So any questions specific to the Innovations in Management Apprenticeship? All good there. All right. No online questions. We're all good to go. So there's one big question that I didn't answer. Does anybody know what question I didn't answer yet? Always, right? How much does it cost? How much does it cost? So I love doing this part of the program, actually, because it's very, very interesting when we play around with numbers. So right out of the gate, there's a flat cost. There's costs for tuition, there's obviously costs for supplies, and there's some little admin costs as a group sponsor. So now we're looking at about a $4,100 number. The really interesting part of that, and I talked a little bit earlier about how you can save some money as you're working somebody up to that entry wage. When you do a big comparison here between what the admin fees are, what the wages, so when we have this, we call it RTI wages, a lot of employers, when they have apprentices, they actually pay them to sit in the classrooms, earning their hourly wage while they're taking classes. So not only are they getting paid when they're doing their on-the-job learning, but now they're also getting paid to sit in the classroom. If the employer takes on all of those responsibilities, and this is two exact scenarios, and I utilize them making $16 an hour, upgrading them to $19 an hour, you'll see a difference of literally less than just about $600 between the actual investment of the employer versus what they would have been investing if they just had a straight employee off the street. So even though there's a little bit of upfront costs, there's a way to save that cost as we're going through the wage progression. And depending on the wage increase, it possibly even could break out even. I've seen that happen for a couple of examples as well. And I keep using this 16 to 19 wage progression, but that is entirely independent to every apprentice. Every apprentice gets their own agreement. Every wage scale for an apprentice is different. And it's not for the employer, it's specifically to the apprentice. So you may have 3 people on different wage scales that you want to put through the program, and that's perfectly fine. They all actually can start at a different wage, and that is part of the program. We're just progressing them through. That's the requirement. The requirement is a progression. And you determine that. Right now I use $3 as an example. Maybe it's only $2. We've got an example where we've got some really, a manufacturer who's got some high-end skilled employees, and they want to get them a little bit of management supervisory experience, and essentially they've figured out that they're just going to do an annual increase, and we've figured out a way to break that up for them so they can show the progression through the apprenticeship. So there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. The requirement is just that there's a progression there, and we can help you calculate how to do that and the best way to present that for you as the employer to your employees. So now I'm going to bring John back up because John is certainly our expert when it comes to talking about funding. And in the room today, we also have representatives from the PA Career Link. And certainly if you have questions, those of you that are viewing virtually, by all means, please put questions in the comment section as you need to. So we'll talk a little bit about how we can fund that. Because I showed you what the actual raw costs are, but there are many, many opportunities for employers to bring in additional monies to fund not only this program, but also the wages while people are going through the program. So John, if you're ready, you're up next.
Thank you, Michelle. Hey, I did check in with the state. We had a question earlier today, and I believe the question was, if you're an individual with a green card, can you be an apprentice? The answer is yes. You have to have a green card. You have to be able to legally work in the United States, and you have to complete your I-9 paperwork, which I'm not familiar with. But yes, individuals with green cards can be apprentices. So I hate to speak on behalf of the state and federal government, but you know, registered apprenticeship program is an investment. You know, equipment and materials and things for your business. It's an investment in educating your workforce too. But the U.S. Department of Labor and the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry understand that sometimes you need help, and they'd like to help you with supporting the cost of your registered apprenticeship program. So federal legislation is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which we call WIOA sometimes. But it's federal legislation that says how federal workforce dollars can be spent to train individuals. And I'd like to kind of create a map for you on that, just so you understand. So federal dollars go to the state. In Pennsylvania, each state gets a portion of these workforce dollars. In Pennsylvania, it goes to the Department of Labor and Industry. And by formula, the Department of Labor and Industry splits that up to local workforce development boards. And the local workforce development boards oversee the Pennsylvania Career Link offices, and that's where you need to go to access these funds. So we'll talk about the WIOA funds, individual training account. That's actually pretty cool. And maybe I can give you brief examples. I would walk into a Career Link office. I would say I'm a horseshoer, best horseshoer you ever saw. Nobody's really hiring horseshoers, and I really don't have any other skills, and I need upskilled. There's eligibility requirements. I may have been out of work. I may be underemployed. I may be 18 to 24 and have a child. I may have been impacted by the opioid pandemic. There's a lot of ways that a person can be eligible, so I wouldn't make somebody ineligible just because you don't think they are. You should talk to your Pennsylvania Link office and have them deem eligibility. But registered apprenticeship programs are automatically eligible to be placed on the state's eligible training provider list. Therefore, individual training accounts can be used to support registered apprenticeship program training. And I'm not sure in this area, is it $8,000 for pardon me? 10. So $10,000 for an eligible individual can go towards the cost up to for registered apprenticeship programs. There's on-the-job training, and that would be if you hired an individual, and rather than covering the classroom costs, you might want to offset a portion of their wages. So through on-the-job training account for same eligibility requirements, rather than paying for the classroom training, you could cover half of their wages for the first 6 months up to, is it 10,000? Up to $10,000. So there's that. And then, so you have a workforce and you want to train them. There's something called incumbent worker training, and based on this number of employees you have, it varies between 50 and 90% that the Pennsylvania Career Link can offset the cost of training. So the idea behind that is really there's three scenarios where you can use incumbent worker training, but the one would be registered apprenticeship program, where you take somebody in one occupation, you train them to go to another occupation. So they elevate in their occupation, their wage raises, and you intend to hire somebody to backfill a lower position. You can use incumbent worker training. The idea behind that is the person has to be employed with you for 6 months or longer, but it's really the majority of the cohort, they call it, the federal language. So if you had 5 apprentices and 3 were there for 6 months or longer, you could put 2 in that were there less than 2 months or 6 months. So there's incumbent worker training. There's customized job training, CJT, and that's where the board, that's a little bit into the weeds. I really don't want to get into it, but it's an option where they can come out, the needs are, and provide a contract with you to help support certain kinds of training. And for the ITAs, the individual training accounts, the on-the-job training accounts, if an individual's eligible for that, they're probably eligible for what we call supportive services. And I'm going to, once more to the Career Link, is it $500 a person? It varies. Say, for instance, you have a new apprentice and it requires tolls or uniforms, or you might need transportation, or you might need child care while they're involved in training. It can vary between $500 or more per individual. So that actually goes to the individual to help ease the burden on them to be involved in a registered apprenticeship program. So that's called supportive services. There's a grant right now available through the Pennsylvania Apprenticeship and Training Office, and actually my organization is this grant for the state. It's $1.2 million is available for new apprentices from backgrounds. So and that's the eligibility requirement there. If you come from a diverse background, we're talking women, people of color, veterans, people who are clients of OER, things like that. The state is offering $1,500 per apprentice for new apprentices. They could be your current workforce, hires, but it's really for individuals from diverse backgrounds. Next slide. So if you have a registered apprenticeship program, and if it's tied to an institution that offers college credit, you can use Pell Grants up to $3,000, but it has to be tied to a training organization, education provider who offers college credits. There's the GI Bill that offers, if you're a veteran or a family member, eligible family veteran, you can actually use your GI Bill to support monthly, living expenses while you're involved in a registered apprenticeship program. And I really respect the folks who serve for this country, and I would really, if I were a veteran, I would check with your veteran representative to see if that's the best use of your funds. And then through the Department of Community and Economic Development, there's a program called WEDNET, Workforce Education Network, and it's a 5-year cycle that's available to each employer, and that means that you can access funds the first year, skip the second year, access funds the third year, skip the fourth year, and then access funds on the fifth year. And sometimes they let you do 2 years in a row, but you have to skip 2 years in a row. But you can actually access up to $2,000 per employee and up to $100,000 per company when you're on an on-year. You usually access those funds. They're called WEDNET providers, and a lot of times it's community colleges, but I think East Stroudsburg is a WEDNET provider. I'm not 100% sure. But even if you access the funds organization, the provider, they don't have to be the training provider. You can go to one training provider and use those funds with another training provider. I hope that makes sense. But that is WEDNET. And then there's a lot of other funds that come down the pike. Like, for instance, my organization, if you're involved in manufacturing, we have a grant with Jobs for the Future. We have a contract with Jobs for the Future through the U.S. Department of Labor. And I think we're actually going to get additional funds in September. We were offering $1,000 for new apprentices who didn't come from a diverse background, and $2,000 for apprentices who came from a diverse background, who are from a diverse background. So this is a sample of some funds that are available, but you really need to check with your local workforce development board, or in Michelle's case, she's following it through the Innovations in Management program. But there are quite often times that funds come down the pike, and my organization does our best to bring additional funds to Pennsylvania to leverage with the funds that I mentioned. And the WIOA funds, I don't want to go too far into the weeds, but there's WIOA funds, there's Pell Grants, there's GI Bills, there's WEDNET, the funds I offer. A lot of times those funds can be braided. So you can use these funds, plus these funds, plus these funds. So the one thing that the folks at the CareerLink do and the workforce boards is they help keep you out of trouble by telling you which funds you can combine or braid or leverage and which ones you can't. And are there any questions? Michelle?
I think that's all the questions that we had. Did anybody in the room have any more questions about pretty much anything? On the last slide here, we can see we've got John's information. So anyone who's interested in developing an apprenticeship, that's a really great place to start. Anyone who has questions more specifically about ours, either our innovations in management or how we got to where we are, we're glad to do that. And Tracy Klebon is in the room with us. And Tracy, if you want to maybe come up and introduce yourself real quick. She's the business services manager at the PA CareerLink Luzerne County, and certainly is a wealth of information and definitely your first call when you want to talk about accessing some of the WIOA funding services. So, and I see Kathleen had another question.
Hi, everyone. I am Tracy Klebon. I'm the Business Services Manager with PA CareerLink Luzerne County. If you have any questions regarding how to get started in apprenticeships, looking for more information, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you and make formal introductions to either Michelle or John Tkach. Thank you.
I just wanted everyone to see Tracy's pretty face this morning. Kathleen, did you have a question? We have not begun this program. We were really to get started last March when everything closed back down. So now we're back to recruiting. So employers are getting their employees ready to pull their apprentices together. So we're hoping to start this within the next month or so. Depending on pretty much on how quickly we can get the paperwork done is really what it's going to come down to. So we're going to get this off the ground again here this early this fall. Is that now? There we go. Got it. So some of the groups that we worked with to kind of come up with some of the programs, the guidelines, the skills, McDonald's was a big part of pulling these pieces together, FNCB Bank and Shot North America. So as you see, we've got a very interesting, eclectic group of, between food service, business finance, as well as manufacturing, who helped us pull the categories together. We are very excited about getting started, and our original plan was to really be in a classroom so that everybody, the apprentices, can essentially work off of each other and create those, their own little network. So we're hoping that by the time we first get these first couple of classes up off the ground, we'll be able to do that. And as we keep adding, that group just gets bigger and bigger. And I think that that's really a benefit to not only employers, but to the apprentices as they're going through their program, because they're creating their own network of support through that program as well. Any other questions? Anthony. Yeah, that's a great question, Anthony. And internships versus apprenticeships is the question. And here's what's exciting, and John, certainly jump in when you think about this. The apprenticeship program is truly registered, and it is a very, very specific set of guidelines. If we change those guidelines, they have to be presented back to the state for approval, then brought back over again. And at the end of that, there is the credentials piece of it. So the internship pieces are a little bit more loose. There are typically, if they're being done for credit, schools require them to complete a list of tasks while they're doing their internships. But oftentimes, employers will hire someone for the summer or maybe just for a short-term period over some winter breaks. And in those cases, yes, there are work that gets done for the employer, but there really isn't a set of true specific set guidelines that always need to be completed by the apprentice. And I think the other way to look at this is the apprenticeship brings with it a mentorship and a training at a level above where the apprenticeship or the internships often lie. Did you want to add to that in any way, John?
I mean, not really, but a registered apprenticeship program is, but a registered apprenticeship program is an actual program where an internship is part of another type of educational program. The apprenticeship program is usually an alternative to either like a college education or a technical training school or something like that. And it's really customized to meet the employer's exact needs. There's a lot of times where an individual will come out of a training program but still need a lot of training. That actually occurs during the registered apprenticeship program, not only the classroom training, but the customized training to meet that individual employer's needs. Yep. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And interesting, something to think about. We didn't talk about it today, but it's important when we think about it. We're talking about the innovations in management that's specific to our training provider being LCC. Luzerne County Community College had the classes that offered the skills that we needed to teach in this program. Many apprenticeships will partner with maybe a local CTC, a career technical center, or depending on what the apprenticeship is, there may be a very specific organization that provides the credentialing that they need. So oftentimes with an apprenticeship, even though there's a set number of, and it's state defined, it has to be a minimum of 2,000 hours, right, and a minimum of 144 classroom hours. As long as you're meeting those requirements, the training can be done in a different way. There's nothing saying that any post-secondary organization has to complete that training. So the classroom training can be done in a variety of different ways by a variety of different institutions. And in some cases, more than one institution can be providing that same classroom training.
Right, and the other thing I'd like to add to that too is you mentioned career and technical centers or CTCs, and the State Apprenticeship Training Office actually just presented to the PACTA Association, Pennsylvania Apprenticeship Training Coordinators Association, last week, the week before last in State College. But the idea is to form a relationship between registered apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeship programs. So like an employer involved in a registered apprenticeship program, they're skilling up their workforce, but yet they're connecting with local school districts and it could be community colleges, it could be anybody who runs a pre-apprenticeship program. As long as that program aligns and it's the same occupation, as long as it's connected to a registered apprenticeship program, and as long as there's some type of employer engagement where the apprenticeship program says, look, we guarantee an interview, or we may do internships, or there's some type of engagement there, you can register a pre-apprenticeship program connected to a registered apprenticeship program. And what that does is supply you with a dependable pipeline of skilled workers coming in your door. We're doing a lot of that in Western Pennsylvania. with pre-apprenticeship programs. We have about 20 school districts now involved in pre-apprenticeship programs for manufacturing. And it's over 100 pre-apprentices. And I know that the one group, they had 20 pre-apprentices. Every one of them got a job in manufacturing when they completed their program. So it's building that ecosystem right now. So now the first step is to create the registered apprenticeship program. And the next step would be follow up and create the ecosystem through pre-apprenticeship.
Thanks, John. Any other questions? All right. So I think this is a wrap. I'd like to thank everyone for being here this morning. It is a little bit toasty in here. It's a little bit toasty outside. Thank you for those of you who are watching us virtually. We appreciate your time as well. Again, thanks to John for coming up. Thanks for the Career Link for being such great partners. Thanks to Wyoming Valley Chamber of Commerce for having us this morning. And thanks for Park Media for making us look good. So if anyone has any questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out. All of the information, including additional paperwork, can be found on our website under the Workforce Development tab. So it's the www.pittstonchamber.org.
And just one last thing, too. If you remember, please
John.
visit the Pennsylvania Apprenticeship and Training Office website. They put a lot of new information out there. There's a lot of information available about registered apprenticeship programs.
All right, perfect. Thanks, everyone.